Howdy, folks. The term Kinnikinnick derives from the Unami, Delaware, and it means smoking mixture. And there's an Ojibwe word that's very similar, which is Kinnikinnick, which is to mix something, to animate with something inanimate. And from the Proto-Algonquin language, the very most ancient version of the language, Kinnikinnick means mix it. So this is what they're, it's a smoking blend that they usually added tobacco to, but it was either to, a lot of people said that it was just to make the tobacco taste better, so they mixed it with like citric plants that are found in the United States, in the Midwest, South, and the Northwest, and Canada, and everywhere pretty much. But it turns out that the three ingredients that were most often used were bearberry, red oyster dogwood, or any of the dogwood species. They also used the evergreen sumac, and the staghorn sumac, and the smooth sumac. Although people think that those plants are poisonous, they're actually not poisonous. These plants contain acidic substances that are called terpenes and flavonoids. They are carbon-based structures, and they often have produced anti-inflammatory effects when people use them. But these exact same substances are also found in cannabis, and really we haven't actually proven whether or not flavonoids or terpenes, how much do they affect the psychoactivity of cannabis in the first place. We don't know if they interact with the cannabinoids or what. But it seems to be that by mixing all of these phytochemicals together, you produce a highly narcotic effect, which would make sense because concentrated marijuana that contains terpenes, acidic terpenes, at levels of up to 20 to 25 to 30%. That means that they're playing a role in the psychoactivity, in which dabs are much more quote-unquote psychedelic than marijuana bud. Salvia divinorum is a plant that comes from Mexico, which is used by the Aztecs and the Mayan and the Zapotec and the Toltec people. And the main ingredient in Salvia divinorum that's hallucinogenic is a terpene, a phytochemical terpene. So let's say it together. This is the Anishinaabe word for sumac, staghorn sumac. Ba-kwan-a. A book called Medicinal Plants of the Heartland, which was wrote in the 1870s, I would suppose. And the writers were Connie Kay and Neil Billington. There's an excerpt from the book that reads, quote unquote, many Indian tribes use sumac species interchangeably for many medicinal purposes. For peace pipe ceremonies, they use the dried berries and powdered bark mixed with tobacco. Some overdosed and hallucinated, believing they were flying through the air. So, a cold infusion of the berries is a cooling drink in fevers, and it is a benefit in diabetes. The bark of the root is claimed to form an antiseptic, dressers for ulcers and open wounds. And so, very, very interesting. And chemical constituents, of course, there's gallotanic acid, and tannic acid has anti-inflammatory, but also some toxic effects. And physiological action of Rus glabra or staghorn sumac in one individual of doses of 120 drops of tincture. They wrote of the tincture. They didn't write how much they extracted, but they probably extracted a shitload, just like I do when I make tinctures of plants. And so the guy said that he got a headache, dryness, heat of the nostrils, ulceration of the mouth, loss of appetite, with painful distress in the stomach and bowels, diarrhea, scanty secretion of urine, fatigue, dryness of the skin, copious sweat during sleep. One symptom was also developed in the case that I desire to comment upon. This is directly from the book. Dreams of flying through the air. So this part of the book is actually referring to a study that was done in another place. This has nothing to do with Dr. Connie Kay or Neil Billington, but this is just when they observed a study going down with somebody using a very high potent extract of the tincture. And so what I have to say is that he pretty much poisoned himself. In different plants, the chemicals are found in different places, kind of like with cannabis. how the flower and the bud in the middle contains the most THC. But now we're going to talk, it's kind of the same way with sumac. The red bud in the middle contains the hallucinogen that's found in here. We're going to talk about experience Dr. Connie K herself had with the plant. As she wrote that during the summer of 1879, while botanizing near Bergen Point, New Jersey, I came into a swarm of furious mosquitoes. Quickly after cutting a large branch from a sumac bush at hand, she said that afterwards she ate the refreshing berries, and for 3 successive nights following this occurrence, I flew over the city of New York with graceful and delicious motion. And she said that she would give several years of my life to experience in reality. And she asked in a query, it says, query, did I absorb from the piercing hands sufficient of the bark to produce the effect, or was it from the berries I held in my mouth? Well, I would say, when it comes to the effects, it would be dihydroxy-4-methoxybenzoic acid, which it has many similarities to mescaline, and it's found in abundance more inside of the berries than the leaves. And I think that's very interesting, but like I said, like when these pipes in Washington, they found pipes that had sumac resin, and I'm sure that if you smoked enough of the leaves, then just getting trimethoxybenzoic acid is already sort of psychoactive. And another interesting thing that no one ever talks about is how THC is a carboxylic acid just like gallic acid, so maybe smoking large quantities of the resin was super psychoactive. Bakwan. Alright, this is Kinnikinnick. It's an Anishinaabe / Delaware word for bearberry. But it has also been used to describe red or dogwood. I believe that I have heard that Kinnikinnick is similar to the word Kinnikinnick, or like I already kind of said at the start of this video, which means that it would probably mean to gather and to mix something, but I'm sure that the bearberry was one of the main ingredients for at least the Anishinaabe speaking people, and this plant is found on the shores of the Great Lakes, and it's very beautiful. And I would advise against you picking too much of it. Other people have already picked enough of this plant and buy it from those people. But let's talk about this plant. Here are some of the anti-inflammatory flavonoids found inside of bearberry, and there's also arbutin, which is a toxic substance, but not completely toxic. It is used as a skin lightening agent. It also has been used by Alexander Shulgin, hydroquinone, to make F22, which is a psychedelic amphetamine that seems to have very few effects. Little data exists about the pharmacological properties. But I think that the flavonoids are producing most of the effect. And here are some of the flavonoids inside of cannabis. Very interesting. Forgot to mention that it also contains tannins. Now, tannins are anti-inflammatory, and they're found inside of grapes and wines in high concentrations, but it's also really good for you. It affects the adrenal system too as well, so it could be psychoactive, but just be careful. I would say there's no real need to actually make an extract of this plant, because all of the chemicals that are medicinal are found in it right away. So, Isqua Bimag, the Anishinaabe word for dogwood that I pronounced wrong. The last ingredient that was prominently used in Kinnikinnick, it also has rutin, a flavonoid, which is very similar, but rutin is a citrus flavonoid glycoside found in buckwheat, and it's also found in peaches. So if you go up and find some red oyster dogwood, you see the plant that just looks like that, then fucking break it open and sniff it, because it smells just like peaches. But there's also other substances in it. The psychoactive effect of smoking the bark of dogwood is almost very similar to nicotine. It's like a 30-minute buzz. Now, I have foraged and extracted and used all the ingredients together, and I would say it's a very pleasant, very good tasting smoking blend. It's a very good alternative to marijuana or tobacco. But if you add tobacco in it, it also kind of adds to the inebriating type of drowsy type of effect. But it's actually not complete. It's actually, I would say, stimulating, not drowsy. When I used all of the three substances individually, I found that sumac was the most hallucinogenic, resembling cannabis in its hallucinogenic effects, whereas dogwood was kind of like nicotine, and bearberry, it seemed almost like it could be poisonous. Another experiment I also tried was extracting all three of the substances individually and then putting them back together into the Kinnikinnick mixture, but with the extracted resin form, in which when I make extractions, I use as much plant material as possible, and then I dump ethanol into a bucket of the plant material and then sift it out and evaporate the ethanol so that you get the pure resin of the plant and the oils. And it almost put me to stupefaction. It was almost like a drunkenness that lasted for 40 minutes when I inhaled all three of these plants together. And that it's not actually enjoyable. It's better to just use the plants instead of extracts.